little bit longer than I did. I got out as soon as I could after my command tour and came out here to Rocky Flats. And then when he got out of the Navy, I said, why don't you come out here to Rocky Flats and work out here? We can keep all the nuclear stuff going, and Colorado is a great place to be. Would you all agree with that? Yes. A lot better than the wet, humid atmosphere of Virginia Beach, Virginia. Anyway, and then after Rocky Flats closed down, I dragged him out to Argonne National Lab with me when I was doing some consulting work. And so he and I have had this long history. He and his wife Florence, and we've gotten together. We get together periodically with another classmate who lives down in Highlands Ranch. And as you read in his little bio there, he's one of the few submarine guys that I know that went around the world twice and under the ice twice. I didn't do either of those. None of them. But we each had our own story, and JJ's a great presenter. I joined him when he set up the commissioning group for the USS Colorado, and I got a chance to go to the commissioning, got a hat and everything. So welcome Captain John J. Mackin.
Let me make sure we turn down. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Gary.
May I interrupt? I've been asked to interrupt.
Oh, yes.
All right. Those are beautiful. Whoa.
One submariner to another.
Oh, well, thank you, sir.
What is that? Explain to everybody.
So these are submarine dolphins, and these are the insignia that sailors who are qualified in submarines get to wear, only a smaller size. Gary has his on. So this is the symbol of the submarine force, and to earn these dolphins, it takes quite an extensive process. I mentioned it briefly here in the brief, but it takes about a year or so for the sailors to learn all the systems, and they have to learn systems throughout the boat, not just their specialty. And that's one of the things that distinguishes the submariners, because everybody depends on everyone else. And so that's kind of the symbol of the submarine force, and those are really cool.
Okay. All right.
All right, well, thank you.
We'll just put it on the table.
Okay, all right.
Let me just ask a question. So where do you get something like that? Did he make that?
I don't know. That's,
Where'd you get that?
Where did you
No,
get
I'm a submariner too, and while wandering around the world, I found them somewhere.
Wow.
all right.
It's been hanging in my house for over 20 years.
Wow.
Thank you, thank you. So, thank you all for having me today. It's a pleasure to talk to you about USS Colorado. I'm here with my wife Florence, my partner in crime, and Florence has been an integral member of all our efforts with the USS Colorado, and continues to be. She's actually treasurer of our new association that I'll talk about here at the end. But today I'd like to talk a little bit about commissioning, the construction period, the commissioning, and what USS Colorado is currently up to, as far as we know, as far as they'll tell us. So USS Colorado is the 15th member of the Virginia class of submarines, the latest class of attack submarines. It was named in 2012 at the ceremony at the Capitol, and the following year is when we first formed the commissioning committee. I'll talk a little bit later about what the commissioning committee is and what it does later on in the brief. But the boat was assembled at the Electric Boat Facility in Groton, and it's the fourth ship named the USS Colorado. These are the three previous ships. The one at the top was the battleship BB-45, which saw service during World War II, participated in many of the major campaigns in the Pacific.
Stand next to the screen so we can get you and
All right, okay, all right. She was the lead ship of her class of 2, and she earned 7 battle stars for her actions during World War II. The previous one was an armored cruiser that was built in 1905 and did see some service in World War I. And actually, its name was changed in 1916 to USS Pueblo, not the USS Pueblo that you've heard about that's in North Korea, but it was named USS Pueblo so the name could be freed up for the battleship. And the first USS Colorado was actually built before we were a state, and it was named after the Colorado River. It was built and commissioned in 1858, saw service during the Civil War, and also it saw action in the 1870s off of the Korean Peninsula, which is something I was unaware of till I started learning about USS Colorado. But in opening up the Far East, there were some conflicts at the USS Colorado was involved in, and actually 8 members of the crew and the attached Marine detachment won medals of honor for that action. So, a brief history of submarines. Our first submarine was the USS Holland, and that was purchased by the Navy in 1900, so that we celebrate the submarine birthday every year in October. Submarines saw much action during World War II. They were very active in the Pacific. They sunk over 5 million tons of Japanese shipping, which severely impacted their ability to resupply their forces throughout the Pacific. And so we had, at the end of the war, we had about 230 submarines, and some 16,000 sailors were involved and conducted 1,700 war patrols. Now, the submarines were a very small part of the Navy, at less than 2%, yet they sunk 55% of the enemy shipping and maritime losses. We lost 52 submarines during World War II, and the submarine veterans still celebrate that today. Every state has a memorial to one of the lost submarines. The one in Colorado is to the USS Grayling, and it's at Sloan's Lake Park. And the submarine veterans have a ceremony there every year to commemorate the lost submarines of World War II. The first nuclear submarine was the USS Nautilus, and that was commissioned in 1955. And now our entire fleet is nuclear. The last diesel submarine was decommissioned in the 1980s, I believe.
1989.
1989, okay. And at the height of the Cold War, we had nearly 100 attack submarines and 41 missile submarines. Right now, we're down to about 48 attack submarines and 18 missile submarines.
What happened to the rest of them?
They were decommissioned.
Razor blades.
So they're razor blades, yes. In fact, all the submarines I served on are razor blades. So we have 2 major types of submarines. We have attack submarines and missile submarines. The attack submarines have the traditional missions of anti-shipping warfare, anti-submarine warfare. They can launch special operations forces and also carry Tomahawk missiles to conduct land attack against land targets. So currently we have about 40 of the older type Los Angeles class submarines, the type that Gary and I served on. They originally had 60, and they've been decommissioned over the years, and they're reaching the end of life, and that is one of the reasons why they're building the Virginia class to replace the Los Angeles class. Missile submarines, we have, it's kind of subdivided. Traditionally, We have the strategic missile submarines, which carry the Trident missile, which is our strategic deterrent. We have 14 of those. Originally, that class of submarine had 18, and after the START treaties, 4 of those were converted to a conventional role and carry up to 150 Tomahawk missiles, as well as the ability to launch SEAL forces. So there's a breakdown of the current submarine classes and kind of a relative size of each. The Ohio class, they're currently building the replacement for the Ohio class. Those ships are getting kind of long in the tooth, up into 40 years. Their life has been extended. So the replacement is due to go on patrol in 2031, and is currently being built at Electric Boat. The Los Angeles class, as I mentioned, are going away. And the Virginia class, we're still building those. This schematic, the next block of the Virginia class will actually be like 90 feet longer. They're going to put a new section of missile tube, of the Tomahawk missile tubes after the sail here that'll extend it by 90 feet. And so those are currently just started being built. Seawolf class, we only have 3 of those. Those were the ones we were building at the end of the Cold War, and when the Cold War ended, they were determined to be too expensive and no longer required. So they were very expensive, big, fast, and carried twice as many torpedoes as any previous class submarine. So this is a little bit about the Virginia class. It's 377 feet long with a beam of 34 feet. Displaces 7,800 tons, so it's a pretty big submarine. Navy won't tell us exactly how fast it goes or how deep it goes. I don't know about that Navy. They're just tight-lipped. I don't know, especially those submariners ask questions.
As a destroyer guy, we're pretty sure those numbers are wrong. We'll never know. We've tracked them.
The Virginia class has several new technologies that I'm not used to. For instance, it doesn't really have a periscope as we old submariners know it. It has basically a video mast that goes up, and it has a video camera, and they view the surface through that. And so that actually helps in the design of the ship, since they don't have to have a 30-foot tube, and consequently they've placed the control room in the middle level where there's more space. But it's kind of a interesting place to visit the control room now and see all the video screens instead of the periscope. So. And it's controlled by an Xbox controller now, so they say all the sailors know how to use it, and it's a lot cheaper than what the Navy was providing, so they've outfitted them all now with Xbox controllers. The reactor core lasts the entire 33-year life of the ship, which is quite a change from the early submarines, which had to be refueled every few years, and that's a big evolution. They have to go in the shipyard, and I was on one refueling overhaul that was supposed to be, I don't know, 12 months or 18 months, and it was like twice as long. So, and the Virginia class.
Talk about the propulsor. That's
The
right.
propulsor. So the propulsor is a new thing to replace a propeller, but again, that's a classified. All the Navy says is that it has a pump jet propulsor, and
No screw.
and it's no screw. Yeah, we really don't know how it works, and the Navy won't say. And it's very interesting. Any time that part of the ship is visible, like when it's out of the water, it's always covered. So I have some pictures of that coming up.
Like a jet ski? That's right.
I believe it's something like that, but again, the details are classified.
All magic.
Yeah. So the Virginia class has the traditional roles of the attack submarines: anti-surface warfare, strike warfare, anti-surface warfare, And the peacetime functions of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, which Gary and I spent a lot of time doing during our naval careers. And again, the ability to launch SEALs. They have a special lock-in, lock-out chamber. They can launch a whole platoon of SEALs at one time, as opposed to the earlier. I did that once on my ship, and we did it through an escape hatch, and you could put like 3 or 4 guys in there at one time. They have a whole huge section that they can all go out at once. And mine warfare, which is something no one ever wants to do. The construction, it takes nominally about 5 years to build a submarine these days, although we're trying to improve the building rate, and they're trying to get to, when they first started the Virginia class, they started at building 1 a year, and around the time of, during USS Colorado's construction, they tried to increase that to 2 a year. Well, they're up to about 1.2 or 1.6. They're constrained by the workforce and industrial capacity of the 2 shipyards that build the submarines. So the way they build the submarines these days is they build them in modules. And there's a teaming agreement, since our building rate is so low, in order to keep both shipyards in business. They split the work between Electric Boat in Groton and Huntington Ingalls in Newport News. And each of them build modules. They build part of the ship, and then they ship those modules to the final construction yard, and they alternate construction yards. So the final assembly for Colorado was in Groton, and I have some pictures of that. So this is the stern section was built by Electric Boat, and it was built at their facility in Rhode Island, and that's where they build the hull sections. And then they're shipped to Groton, which is relatively short transit. And here you see the stern section of USS Colorado arriving in Groton in April of 2015. And the picture on the left was at the keel laying ceremony in March. And talking about the propulsor, this is the propulsor covered in the canvas.
What is it in the other photo?
It's there it is. It's covered as well. Yeah. The bow section was built by Huntington Ingalls in Newport News, and this is a picture that was taken by one of the newspapers in New York as it passed up the East River, and there it arrived in Groton in July of that year. These are the major milestones during the construction and leading up to the commissioning. The events that are bolded are the ones that were the kind of the public events that we got to participate in. And we have some pictures of those coming up. This is the ship's crest. An interesting story is that the commissioning committee sponsored a contest, a design contest for people to submit designs, and the ship would pick a winning one. And we got over 100 entries, and this was the one that the ship picked, or it was very similar to this. And of course, there was a blind contest, and they told me the one they picked, and I looked at the entries, and the entry came from New York, and I said I was kind of disappointed that somebody from New York would win this when we had many entries from Colorado. Well, it turns out that the person, the young man who submitted this, was actually from Colorado. He had graduated a few years earlier from high school here in Colorado, enlisted in the Navy, was quickly selected for an officer program. They sent him to college, and he got his degree, was commissioned, and at the time of his submission, he was a student at Nuclear Power Training Unit in New York. So he was en route to submarines, and subsequently he got orders to USS Colorado, and so he was a member of the commissioning crew. So it's kind of cool that the ship's crest was designed by a young officer here from Colorado.
JJ, you want to cover the things that, like the stars and the so forth?
Okay, so this, if I remember them all.
Yeah.
So the 7 stars here are to commemorate the battleships, 7 battle stars. And from land and sea untamed is the slogan on there. And then, of course, we've got a Bronco to celebrate the Broncos and with the mountains in the back. So this was the first public ceremony, keel laying ceremony in March of 2015. And the keel laying ceremony for our ship, the ship sponsor is Annie Mabus, who was daughter of the Secretary of the Navy at the time, just by chance, right? And her sister was sponsor of USS Washington, which was the boat immediately ahead of USS Colorado, and that one was built in Newport News. So what happens at that ceremony? Now the ship has actually been sort of being built, for 3 years up to this point. But this is a ceremony to kind of celebrate the start of construction. And the ship sponsor will chalk her initials on a piece of steel, and then the shipyard worker will weld those initials onto that piece of steel, and that gets mounted into the ship. And of course, submarine really doesn't have a keel like most surface ships, but that's the ceremony. And that was shortly after the crew reported. The christening was held in 2016, and that was a shipyard event. And there you can see the submarine is still on the building ways there, and they held it inside the construction hall. A few weeks later, it was put in the water, which was the float-off event that was on that previous slide. But we were privileged to have about 7 of the veterans from the battleship were there. That's in the lower left. Sadly, some of those gents are no longer with us, but they at every event they came to, they were a real hit. Quite a bunch of characters and formed by their experience during World War II. And this, of course, is the ceremony where ship sponsor breaks a bottle of sparkling wine over the ship. And the sparkling wine we used for this was made by a vineyard here, a winery in Colorado, Ballestery. And they made the wine for that. And the bottle was chilled in a vat of water that contained water from the Colorado River that was brought out for that. So we tried to get that Colorado thing going there, A little bit about the crew, approximately 135 members of the crew. And of course, today's forces are all volunteers throughout all the services, but once a person joins the Navy, they have to volunteer specifically for service in submarines. Average time on board is 3 years before they're eligible to rotate to another ship or shore station or leave the Navy, as some do. We talked a little bit before about the training required to become qualified in submarines and earn their dolphins. So that's quite a rigorous training program.
Excuse me.
Let me.
Are there any Colorado residents currently serving on the USS Colorado?
I don't know. I'm kind of out of touch. We had about 4 or 5 at the commissioning, including the officer who designed the crest. We had another gentleman, who became a sonarman, who earned his dolphins while the ship was under construction, and he was from Colorado. And normally, of course, the dolphins are pinned on by the commanding officer on the boat, but he wanted to have his pinned on out here where his family could view it. So it was right about the time that we had scheduled a crew visit, and we brought him out, and we had his dolphin pinning ceremony in the rotunda of the state capitol, and his dolphins were pinned on by both the chief of the boat and a World War II submarine veteran who served on USS Finback and was a sailor who pulled George Bush out of the water when he was rescued by the submarine. So life aboard a submarine, and the submarines are pretty cramped. What you're seeing on the left there is the crew's mess. That contains seats for about 36 people. So obviously the crew has to eat in shifts. But this is the main area of the ship where they can gather for meals, training, watch movies. And if you see on the bulkhead there, those pictures, those are actually pictures of Colorado that were taken by nature photographer John Fielder. I don't know if any of you know, familiar with his work, but he donated his work, and those now decorate the bulkheads in the crew's mess. And also here you see the serving line for the food. Those are all John's pictures. So. This is a picture of the berthing areas for the enlisted sailors. This is a 9-person bunk room. Currently, USS Colorado is all-male crew, but the submarine force is integrating women into the submarine force. There are a number of submarines that have women attached, so it'll just be a matter of time before they have a mixed-gender crew. I personally not sure how that works exactly these days, but you can see on the left that's a bunk, and the bunk is lifted up, and this is the bedpan where they get to stow all their gear for however long they go out to sea. So
Do they each get their own bed?
no. I was thinking, when they designed the Virginia class, they wouldn't have to do hot bunking anymore. Not the case. So they still have temporary racks that are put in the torpedo room during certain times, and they still have to hot bunk, 2 people. Yeah, so starting with the non-quals. Sometimes I think they, So a little bit more about the submarine. On the left, you see one of the storerooms, one of the dry storerooms where the cans are stowed for their time at sea. And but it's kind of a small storeroom. So when they go out on extended deployment, they normally load out for 90 or 100 days worth of food. And what happens is, like, the canned goods get stowed. After they fill up the storerooms, they get stowed on the deck, and you have to eat your way through the canned goods as you go on deployment. The middle picture there, you see wood covering the normal Formica deck, and that wood is teak from the decking of the battleship Colorado. So after the battleship was dismantled in 1947 in Washington State, pieces of the decking and other parts of the ship were stowed out there. So when the ship was commissioned, the commanding officer requested some of that, and he was a woodworker and fashioned this himself. He also fashioned a little section of that as the entrance to the commanding officer's stateroom. So that's kind of a cool thing. So the officer deck stands his watch standing on the decking of the battleship. And on the right we have a couple auxiliarymen working the atmosphere control equipment. During commissioning, before commissioning, we were able to have 8 crew visits out here. We really enjoyed having them. Generally, they came in groups of 4 or so, and these were the different visits we had. We always tried to find nice things for them to do to, one, reach out to the state, like to schools and things like that, and get to see parts of the state. Here's some pictures up in the upper left. One of the visits, they ran the Boulder. The middle upper is they attended a Broncos game. That was the same visit where we had the dolphin pinning ceremony at the Capitol, but there they got on the Jumbotron at a Broncos game. Upper right, they visited with the submarine veterans, and that's the submarine memorial at Sloan's Lake, you see there. Here they visited a Broncos training camp, got to meet Peyton Manning. Here they are at the Capitol with the superintendent of the Air Force Academy. And on the left is a couple of the culinary specialists that came out, and that was a very interesting visit. We had 2 culinary specialists come out, very junior. They'd only been in the Navy a little over a year, and they spent training. They spent a day of training with Four Seasons in Aspen, the Broadmoor, as you see there, and the Brown Palace downtown. And they spent time learning from the chefs there, and that was a very cool visit. At the end, at the Brown Palace, they were interviewed by the media, and these are 2 of the most junior guys on the boat, and they were just like so professional and answered all these questions with just such great ease and poise. I don't remember sailors being that well poised when I was in the Navy. Just kind of amazing. The commanding officer who built the ship, unfortunately, did not stay for the commissioning. His 3 years were up, and they needed to rotate him. So he was relieved in November of 2017. Oh, actually, Florence and I just met. He's now Captain Franklin, and he was just completed a tour as the commanding officer of the submarine base at Point Loma in California, near San Diego. And so he's getting ready to rotate to Washington, D.C., which will probably be his last tour. So anyway, that was a nice ceremony. We had participation by the ship sponsor, Annie Mavis. So the big event, commissioning, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day of 2018. So that's getting back 5 years now. So the commissioning ceremony is a very traditional ceremony. It's been conducted by navies throughout the world for centuries. And it's a ceremony that about an hour and 15 minutes. About an hour of that are political speeches. And 15 minutes of bringing the ship to life. Man our ship and bring her to life. And the crew will run aboard, and the stirring music from the Navy band, and I have some pictures of that. But I would mention the reason that the commissioning committee exists is for this last bullet. So there are a number of traditional and expected events and ceremonies through the week that the Navy expects but won't pay for. So it's the duty of the commissioning committee to raise the funds and organize those events. And so here are the week events for the commissioning week. And the ones in red are the ones that the commissioning committee organized and paid for. And the blue ones are the ones the Navy did. So actually we raised about $400,000 for all our events. We gave $100,000 to form a scholarship fund for the crew members and their families of USS Colorado. And that's a perpetual scholarship that's being administered by the Dolphin Scholarship Fund. And a number of gifts were given to the crew and paid for those events. So here's one of the events, the crew celebration. We like to have that. We would have liked to have had a nice picnic outside, but March in Groton, a little chilly. So we held it in Morton Gymnasium. And this is a picture of the assembled group and Annie Mavis signing the ship's picture. Actually, we still have several of those cups at home that were passed out. We also had a VIP clam bake held in the same gymnasium for sponsors who contributed to it and the speakers who were participating in the ceremony. So when you see here in the middle, we have then Governor Hickenlooper with the Secretary of the Navy and his daughter Annie Mabus. They're enjoying lobsters. The governor had this. I have another picture of him with this big lobster bib on. Just and then on the lower right, we have these are the veterans who were able to participate in that, along with the ship's commanding officer, executive officer, chief of the boat, and governor got in the picture too. So on the left, there's the governor with two gentlemen. So the gentleman in the center is Major General Lowe, who was the adjutant general for the state of Colorado at the time. Next to him is Eric Schmidt, who's the CEO of Left Hand Brewing, and up in Long Mountain, they were a sponsor. They made a special brew for us. We were able to, they gave us the proceeds from the sales. And it turns out that General Lowe and Eric Schmidt are classmates from the Air Force Academy, class of 1984. But you see, they seem to have gone different paths. The big event of the week, at least for us, was the chairman's reception. That's held the night before commissioning, and that is a place where we acknowledge all sponsors and people who have helped get us to the commissioning point. Thanks to the crew for all their hard work. And so these are some of the gifts that are passed out. The veterans of the battleship had a bell, ship's bell cast by our Colorado sculptor George Lundeen, with special inscription that it was from the veterans of the battleship. And that is the bell that the ship uses every day. They use the ship's bell. And there's another copy of that at CU Boulder. So at CU Boulder, they have a Veterans Memorial Center, which is dedicated to all the veterans from Colorado, and they have special display. And they actually have the bell, the second copy of this bell, but they also have the bell from the battleship, big bell, and they have the bell that served on the first two USS Colorados. So it's kind of an impressive display. Additionally, the gentleman on the left, next to the commanding officer, is Ken Jones, who was one of the battleship veterans. And he is a very interesting person. He had come to an event we had here in 2015, and he had issued this challenge to the crew that we thought was very stirring. So we had that made into a plaque that is mounted in the ship that all the crew members get to pass by every day. And I know you can't read this, I'll read this, but what his challenge was that we, the crew of USS Colorado BB-45, challenged the crew of SSN 788 to wear the name with dignity, to wear the name with honor, and to wear the name with pride. And we hope that all of your voyages are totally successful. We pray that you will never have to fire your weapons in anger, but if you do, be ready and prepared to give him hell. So we thought those were kind of stirring words, and they remain on the ship for every sailor to see every day. This is the ceremony. We had the color guard was from NJROTC unit in Whitfield High School in Colorado Springs. The chaplain was retired Army Colonel Chaplain Andy Meverden, who had retired as chaplain for the Colorado National Guard, and he's a great submarine supporter. He's an associate member of the local submarine veterans, so we see him frequently. And these are the Colorado speakers. As I mentioned, there were many speakers. It was like an hour worth of speeches, so there were many more, but these are just the Colorado speakers. But you know, the local congressman from Connecticut, they have to speak, and then you get the Navy has to speak, and yeah. So anyway, but those were the three speakers. Since Republicans were in office, Senator Gardner was the principal speaker, but everybody got to say a few words there. So one piece of this ceremony is passing the long glass, where a veteran, a Navy veteran, will pass this symbolic long glass to the oncoming officer of the deck, officer of the watch, who mans the watch. So we had Ken Jones do that presentation, participate in that ceremony, and that was great. He really liked that. And long glass is a spyglass, and of course it's not anything we use on a submarine, and I don't think they use it on surface ships anymore, but it's traditional, goes back to the sailing days. It's a telescope. And they're man our ship, bring it to life, and the crew runs aboard. I should really get a video clip of that. I'm sure I got one somewhere. And afterwards we held a ceremony. We had a little celebration on the pier, reception. In addition to wine from Ballestery and beer from Left Hand Brewing, we had buffalo, and we tried to make it a real Colorado event. So it was a great event. So after commissioning, the work of the commissioning committee is done, but we want to, of course, support the submarine throughout its life, support the crew, and so we formed a new organization called the USS Colorado Submarine Association. And our mission here is to support the crew and their families, and we want to encourage support here within the state for USS Colorado, for our own submarine. We also want to tell the crew what a great state they represent. So when we bring them out for crew visits, we try to show them some of the great sites about Colorado. So these are some of the things we do. We have a website. We have a newsletter. We sponsor crew visits out to Colorado. We visit the crew at some of their major events, their changes of command, and they invite us to ship's picnics, and we greet them coming back from deployment, and any other ways that we can think of to help them boost the morale and support the crew and support the families while the crew is away at sea. So we, now they have to go to sea, they can't come out to Colorado as much, you know? So we have, and of course we've had COVID in between, so that kind of slowed us down. So we've had 4 crew visits since commissioning. And the last crew visit was the first one since 2019. We had the commanding officer came out with the supply officer, chief of the boat, and 2 sortermen. These are some of the activities that they participated in. One cool thing is they went from Colorado Springs to Aspen over Independence Pass and visited some of the civic organizations up there. There's some pictures. Commanding officer meeting with the deputy lieutenant governor, not the deputy governor, the lieutenant governor. Visiting the Capitol. There they are at the Air Force Academy. They visited History Colorado Museum, which has quite an extensive collection of military memorabilia. And actually one of the sailors enlisted up in the mountains by Aspen. I think that's at Maroon Bells. And we took him to the Buckhorn in Denver to show him a real Colorado meal.
Just a question. Is there only one crew for the sub?
So this submarine has only one crew. So the attack submarines have one crew, and they're on all the time. Some are able to rotate off in small numbers to go to school and training while the ship's at sea. The ballistic missile submarines have 2 crews, and so one's on, one's off. So that's one of the basic differences between them. Ship's milestone. So the ship is now on its 3rd deployment since commissioning, and have some of the changes of command there. They were on their 4th commanding officer after Commander Franklin, Captain Franklin got relieved. The second commanding officer actually had a medical issue, wasn't able to make their first deployment. So they're on their third deployment now, and we expect that the commanding officer will be relieved shortly after he gets back. It seems to me that the operations are a lot more regular than I remember in my days and Gary's days. Pretty regular. Every 2 years they go on a six-month deployment or so. Their last deployment they got extended to 7 months. And we visited Groton on several occasions, as I've mentioned, and they always treat us warmly. I think they appreciate the support from the state. When we go to visit for homecoming, I always think in the back of my mind, we were probably not the first person they want to see after they've been at sea for 6 months, but they're very gracious in any case and seem to appreciate it. So, one thing I would point out that recently, Adams County at their Riverdale Regional Park put in a Veterans Memorial, and it's in the shape of a model of the battleship. And this was just dedicated on Memorial Day this year. And Ken Jones came up from Texas to say a few remarks. We were supposed to have another veteran, one of the last few remaining, but he couldn't make it because he got sick, I think. But it's a very interesting memorial, and they're kind of cool. I was surprised to see that they did that. So a little bit about our association. So we, like I say, we're dedicated to supporting the crew. We have a number of vehicles to communicate with the public. We have a Facebook page, our website. We have a newsletter list, and of course we have memberships available. It's free to join our email list, keep up with the events of what's happening with the crew as much as they'll tell us. And of course we welcome anyone to become a member and help support us in a little bit more positive financial way. So that concludes my brief. Be happy to answer any questions that I can. Yes?
Are there any plans for the crew to visit the Broomfield Veterans Museum?
Well, that's something we can certainly put on the agenda next time they're out. I'm not sure when the next time we'll see them. Probably next year sometime. But yeah, we could certainly add that to the agenda, yeah.
Could you comment on how the two sections of the boat are merged?
They weld them up together. So, but no, that is an interesting process. You know, they come in these sections and they're all built, filled with gear, filled with all the equipment, and somehow they connect them together. I don't know how they make that all happen. And then, of course, they're welded and it has to be tested and stuff like that. Yes, sir.
I think you mentioned a cruise is like 6 months long. For how long the submarine is actually at sea, and then how long are they off cruise, and what's the crew doing at that time?
So when they have what I was talking about, 6 months is one of their standard extended deployments. So they'll go out for 6 months, and then when they come back, they spend some time at home, but then they're out doing short-term operations. So they go down, they have to periodically shoot torpedoes to maintain proficiency, and they get examinations and stuff. So during that year and a half that they're not on deployment, they're in and out of port, and then near the end when they start to work up for their next deployment, and there's a whole schedule associated with that. When they go out for the 6 months, the last time the ship went, they were actually extended, and it was a 7-month deployment. Of that 7 months, they spent only 17 days in port. And to my mind, that's amazing. Back in the old days, you needed to come in and a lot of stuff had to get fixed up. It took more than 17 days, so, and replenish the ship and load out again. So, so their schedule, that's kind of their schedule in, you know, the big picture. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yeah. Well, when they come back, does another submarine take their route or their?
There are always submarines deployed, and what they do, you know, I think is depend where they go. There's probably general areas where they go. What they may be doing might be dependent, or where they go exactly might be dependent upon whatever it is they're having them do, which of course they won't tell me anymore. You know, so, but there always are submarines deployed. Generally about a third of the force is deployed at any one time in different parts of the world. So. Yes, ma'am.
I think you mentioned that there was a total of 135 people
Mm-hmm.
on there, right? So my question to you, is there like a waiting list for the new crew members to be trained and qualified and selected to be on there when some of the existing crew has served their time and they get off? And then is there like a waiting list?
So it's kind of a continuous process. So different members rotate at different times. And so when one person's getting ready to rotate, the Bureau personnel will send somebody in a short time before they leave. But they probably not in advance enough so that that person is totally qualified. I mean, like for new people, that is. You know, a new person will come aboard and have the qualified submarine. The other person may leave, so they won't have someone qualified in submarines. But they do qualify on the watches as quickly as they can. So, but it's a kind of continuous flow. It's not one group at a time.
So they have sailors that are volunteering.
Right.
You never run out of somebody who's not volunteered.
Well, we haven't yet, but my understanding is recruiting for the all the force, the Navy, and I think all the armed forces, is they're going through some tough times now. I haven't heard any particular shortages in submarine volunteers, but it's a tough time for the military to be recruiting. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So what's it like to be a commanding officer?
What's it like? What's it like, Gary?
Best job ever.
Best job ever. I really enjoyed my time as commanding officer. It's especially on a submarine. You know, you're kind of untethered, much more so than surface ships. You know, so you kind of given some general instructions, and it's up to you to go out and execute without a lot of people looking over your back and stuff, and it's a very satisfying experience. And one of the things that I've discovered since my Navy time is that how close you really get with your crew members. And you know, I have ships that have reunions, and the camaraderie that you built up only becomes apparent much later. So, yeah. Yes, sir.
I was commanding officer of a boat, did all those things.
What boat?
The Thomas Jefferson, John Adams.
John Adams. Oh, okay.
Okay. And what I found after I got out of the service was there is a greater tie as a team on the boat than there is on any other organization I've seen.
Yeah.
And even we built the submarine base up in Oregon, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the people who were on the base, who were serving submarines, were not the team that a submarine
Yeah.
base.
Yeah, it's a very, and I didn't really appreciate it till after you leave. I mean, every day you're dealing with people.
Your life depends
Yeah.
on the other
Right,
guy
and
his life
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that comment. Yes. Yes, in back, ma'am?
Do you have other ships that follow the subs to protect them in a particular area? I know they're at the top, but nuclear.
No. Submarines go out, they work generally independently, and nobody's supposed to be able to find them. But on the other hand, coming in and going out of port, when the ship is on the surface, there are sometimes escorts to ward off. The Russians used to harass the fleet ballistic missile submarines coming out of some of the ports back in the Cold War. I think they're starting to do that again. But when they're out submerged, generally you're operating all by yourself. Yes, sir.
Is the commanding officer on a first name basis to the crew members? You call them by Joe or Skip?
No. I mean, generally it's petty officer, whatever. There is that distinction between the officer and enlisted, and although my impression these days from dealing with the crew of Colorado is that they're less formal than we were, and that was pretty informal. But there still is this kind of officer, but they seem to be a lot more tightly knit these days than I remember. Yes, sir, in the back.
Let me hazard a strategy question, I guess. As a visitor to the museum, I sit here and it's rather awesome to ponder. We have 2, maybe 3 nuclear submarine commanders. We have others in the room who have been in command and control of nuclear weapons. In this day of erratic behavior of Vladimir Putin and others, would you reassure us about the readiness of American nuclear deterrence?
So, the fleet ballistic missile submarines still on patrol with their missiles ready to spin up. And of course, the command and control for the nuclear weapons, I think, still remains the same as in our day. Very strict controls and exercises routinely. I remember when I was on the engineer on a fleet ballistic missile submarine, I was part of the emergency action team. So that's a team that has to get together to verify any nuclear orders, and we would constantly, seemed like once a week, we'd get a drill and it'd wake me up in the middle of the night to go, practice how to do that. So I think those things are still all in place. We have the 14 Trident missile submarines now, which have much greater range than the Polaris that I served on. So I think we still have a strong nuclear deterrent. What that other guy over in Russia is going to do, I can't tell you, though. Yeah, that I worry about. Yes, sir.
JJ, great presentation. In keeping with naval tradition, the first crew, I assume, will all be considered plank owners.
Yes, sir.
Would you explain for everybody what that term means and what its origin is?
So, plank owners, I'm not sure I entirely understand the origin. I mean, it goes back to the old sailing ships. But a plank owner is someone who builds the ship and is on the crew at the day of commissioning. And we gave special recognition to all the plank owners at the commissioning ceremony. We gave them special coins. Oh, that's something I didn't, let me pass this out. So these are the commissioning booklets that actually Florence made. I'll pass those around for you to look at. What did I do with the coins? And I'll also pass around, these are some of the coins that we have made up and give to the crew when they return from deployment. So there's a first deployment coin, a second deployment coin, and this is our committee coin, one of our committee coins. So I'll pass those around for you to look at. I'd like to get those back. But so a plank owner is someone who is on the crew at time of commissioning, and it, again, stems back to the old days. Do you know more about the history of that term than I? No? What's kind of odd, though, is like the commanding officer who built the ship, he rotated before the ship was commissioned. So he was considered a, quote, honorary plank owner. And then somebody who may have just reported a month before commissioning is a plank owner. Which I think actually Ken Franklin groused about a little bit when we met with him for lunch. Yes, sir.
On around the world cruises, how much of it is submerged?
So on the around the world, and my deployments to the Indian Ocean, where you go out, took about a month to get there. You go on station, you may replenish some food before you go on station for 60 days or so, maybe not quite 60. And then we would come in and we did a 4-week upkeep period in Diego Garcia, and then we would go out for another couple months or so, do our operations, come back, load a little food, and come back home, which was almost a month. So that's would be typical. I don't know these days if they can send boats out for 7 months and only have them be in port for 17 days. I don't know how that works exactly, but.
I think the question was, I was wondering the same thing. I mean, once you leave port, do you submerge?
Yeah, you go out, you go down, and you don't come up again except to get your radio traffic, and you stay. Submarines. Modern submarines are designed to be submerged. They're not designed to operate on the surface. They don't do very well on the surface. Yeah, you know, in rough weather, it's like woo.
How do you normally run?
Greater than 400 feet. You know, the exact depths are classified. I guess now they're saying that these can go greater than 800 feet. I think our spiel was we could go greater than 400 feet, but we could go deeper. But you know, so
Greater than 4.
great.
Does the submarine have reverse?
They can operate their engines in reverse.
And they come in real handy when you're coming in.
Yeah, in coming into port, you use that. At sea, not so much, except for training. You know, if you're out at sea, it's submerged. You're going ahead. You know, and unless you have to stop suddenly for some reason, that would be.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Are there any submarines in service today that are not nuclear powered?
No, ma'am. No. So 1989.
Not the United States.
No. Oh, yeah. Not. Yeah. Other nations. Other
places.
Oh, yeah. Do have a number, right? Yeah. Not everybody can afford the nuclear submarines. You know. So we just entered into this agreement with Australia to help them build nuclear submarines, and that's the first for them. But they prior to this just had diesel submarines.
So where would they be built for?
I'm not sure exactly. I think they're going to be built in Australia using a lot of our technology and know-how.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when they decommission the older nuclear subs, what do they do with the reactor?
So they cut out the reactor compartment. They decontaminate it to some degree. They take the fuel out, and they take the rest of the piping systems and they bury them in a big pit in Hanford. And there are pictures that are available on the internet. I can point out 2 of my boats, 3 of my boats. So, yeah.
In a daily routine, the crew is on watch and off watch on 8-hour shifts.
They're now on 8-hour shifts. They used to be 6 hours when we were in, but they've recently, in the last few years, shifted to 8-hour shifts. So, okay. Well, thanks so much.
Well, thank you very much. On behalf of the museum, we'll award you
thank you, sir.
Challenge coin from
All right.
the museum.
All
Thank
right,
you
very
much.
good. All right, thank you.
As a heads up, I'm going to be talking about underway on nuclear power, a day in the life of the submarine in August. So if you want to come back then, we'll tell you more about what happens day to day, or how we get underway and how we sustain ourselves once we are underway.
And I would point out we have some pens, some buttons, and some cards about our web address. If anyone would like to take those, you're more than
We had a
welcome.
great crowd here today too. That was great. Fantastic.